ACT scores across the nation are at an all-time low. Why is this happening? And more importantly, how can your student avoid falling into this trend? In today's video, we'll dive into the reasons behind this big decline in scores, and I'll give you some practical strategies to make sure that your child doesn't make the same mistakes. Stick around to see how your student can stand out from the crowd of dropping ACT scores. Now, the first thing that I've been seeing is a lack of personalized teaching, which just doesn't let students reach their full potential. And this impacts not just the high school classroom, but also the ACT, which I would say is much more important than the classroom anyways. Every student has their own unique way that they learn. Some students are auditory learners, which means that they learn by hearing. Those students do really well with lectures. Many students are visual learners, which means they have to see something in order to learn it well. Those students do really well with graphics and whiteboards that show exactly what's going on in a given problem. Other students learn from reading and writing, which means that they need to have a good note-taking structure in order for them to learn. And now more so than ever, students are being crammed into cookie-cutter learning environments. And this means that they're not engaging with and fully absorbing the materials that they're supposed to. And again, this is true not just in the classroom, but definitely in those generic ACT prep courses. For example, a student that I recently worked with had just finished taking an ACT prep course where the only method of learning was listening to a Zoom lecture with 50 or more other students at the same time. This class led that student to what he considered to be an abysmal ACT score. And it's not really surprising why that is. They had no idea what his preferred method of learning was. When I started working with this student, the first thing we did was dig into his learning style. He said that he does really well in his high school classes, and all he does there is take notes. So when we covered our ACT content and strategies, I had him fill out a note-taking sheet that I found works really well for my students who learn through note-taking. This helped him to truly understand the concepts that we were discussing, and he ended up taking his score from a 22 all the way up to a 28. If your student is trying to prepare for the ACT, you should avoid taking any of these cookie cutter generic ACT prep classes, especially the ones that stick them in a classroom with 20, 30, or even sometimes 50 or more students at the same time. There's just no way that a student can get a personalized learning approach when they're crammed in with that many other students. If they don't have a personalized learning approach, chances are they're going to be wasting their time, and they're also going to be wasting your money. Now, the second biggest thing that's holding ACT scores at an all-time low is the school closures that happened back in 2020 and 2021. When everything collapsed back in 2020, most educators had no idea how to handle an online classroom, and students fell into the habit of surfing the web or browsing Instagram or TikTok or whatever it may be, rather than paying attention to their boring old online algebra class. Now, this has led to some major learning gaps when students are trying to prepare for their ACT. Entire chapters of math never got taught or learned properly, while reading comprehension and other skills also fell behind. Just the other day, I was talking to a student about the graph of a circle, and she straight up just told me, oh yeah, that was during online learning. I have absolutely no idea what that is. And look, that's to be expected. Teachers didn't know what they were doing, students thought the world was ending, and nobody really cared about their Algebra 2 class. But now, those knowledge gaps are coming back to bite students on the ACT. And you need someone who understands exactly where these knowledge gaps are and how to properly go back and fill them in. And one key component of this is knowing how to keep students engaged while they learn. And most of the time, it's not going to be from their boring old math teacher who's older than their parents. Sorry, mom and dad, and all the older teachers out there, but it's just probably true. Especially for digital learning, energy and relatability are some of the most important things that an instructor can have. And while we can't go back in time and fix all the stuff that happened when the schools were closed, if you want your student to get into a good college or earn good scholarships, we need to fix those learning gaps and get that ACT score up. And the way to get your ACT score up is to find someone who has experience helping students do exactly that, just not so much experience that they have a tough time keeping your student engaged. Now, the third thing that I see students getting wrong all the time is that they just don't know how to effectively study for this test. The ACT is a unique test. It's not like any other test that students have ever taken in school before. They ask questions in ways that are designed to trick and confuse you. This means that you can't just study for it in the same way that you would study for your normal English test or your normal physics test. And that's why I personally see so many students with perfect GPAs who just can't seem to figure out this ACT thing. That was exactly the situation that I was in when I took the ACT back in high school. When I wasn't happy with my original score of a 31, I spent over 100 hours studying things like algebra, learning the grammar rules, and tackling tough science problems. And after that 100 hours of studying, my score stayed exactly the same. No improvement at all. I might as well have just sat down in my backyard and spent 100 hours watching the grass grow because there was no benefit to my ACT score. If you want your student to avoid wasting hundreds of hours of their time, you need an effective practice plan. This has to include understanding not just what is on the ACT, but how the ACT asks its questions and preparing specifically for their tricks and traps. And the best way to do this is by studying with real ACT practice questions, so you can get familiar with the weird ways that they ask their questions. Finally, another reason why I see ACT scores at an all-time low is that there's kind of this attitude out there right now that ACT scores just don't really matter that much. A lot of colleges have recently gone to test optional, which makes students think that they just don't have to have a good ACT score. This mindset is a huge mistake that I see some of the students making out there. While a lot of colleges have gone to this test optional sort of structure, this is really just a trick to get more people to apply to their schools. If more students apply to a college, they get to deny more people, and it makes their acceptance rate look way lower than it actually should be, giving them more prestige and a higher Wall Street Journal or US News and World Report college ranking. And studies are starting to come out that show that students who get higher test scores end up getting better college GPAs, transfer less frequently, and are overall just more successful in college. Admissions officers are aware of this, and they're not just going to give students a free pass for not submitting their test score. And if I had to bet, a lot of colleges will be following Georgetown and MIT back to test mandatory policies in the near future. Plus, if you're trying to get a merit-based scholarship to cover the massive rising cost of education, good luck finding one without a good ACT score. I have a number of examples of students that I've personally worked with who have gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarship money just from their ACT scores alone. But really nobody's doing that with just their volunteer work or just their high school GPA. So if your student is planning to attend college, it's an absolute must for them to give the ACT their best effort. To sum this all up, there are a number of reasons why ACT scores are declining so dramatically. From a lack of personalized education opportunities, to knowledge gaps from school lockdowns, to not knowing how to effectively practice and sometimes just not even caring, there are a lot of factors working against students right now. A good preparation program will address all of these factors and give your student the best chance that they have to succeed on the ACT. If you're looking for some help for your student on the ACT, what better place to start than the notoriously difficult math section? I found that there's one simple strategy that students can use on the ACT math section to go from being average to being in the top tier. Download it for free at the link in the description and start preparing the right way.